where I was emotionally in that moment was, there is something so flawed as me as a mother. And the quote that kept coming through my head was, no other success can compensate for failure in the home.
Hi, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Heart and soul, body and mind, all that good stuff. So we're all about embodiment and also incorporating depth and spirituality and health and all things that are relevant to the women of today. We live in super interesting times. Wendy Bunnell, my guest today, is a podcaster in her own right. She's a grandma. She's got 6 kids. She's been a foster parent. She really helps women to kind of tap in, kind of into like their messiness and put it in perspective so that they can shine forth and heal and help other women tap into their own magnificence through that messiness. Listen in as we have a really killer discussion on how we can take our failings and leverage them to be a powerful voice and healer for those in similar situations. Hey everyone, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm Cherie Burton, and I'm definitely seeking wholeness today because I am in recovery from a nasty bronchial respiratory something or other. So I honestly considered canceling this recording, but in speaking with my dear Wendy here, who you'll hear from in a minute, she's had the same issue, but we're just moving forward because this is life. And this is what we do as women. We show up as we try to navigate the path of integration. And that's what Women Seeking Wholeness is all about. But let me tell you a little bit about her. So she is a best-selling author, international best-selling author. She calls herself a serial entrepreneur, which I like. That's a woman after my own heart. I totally get it. She's a speaker. She actually runs her own podcast called Success Through Failing, of which I have been a guest. So she's returning the favor for me today. But anyway, she just has this beautiful movement around inspiring women, helping them to kind of tap into their magnificence. But the whole impetus around it and the reason that I wanted her on, not only because she's a mom of 6 and she has grandchildren and we're the same age. She has this whole business background, but her impetus or her emphasis in what her message is about is to spread hope and healing to women in particular who've gone through hell. That's like, there's no other way to put it. Like, and how to define success around failure and what it means in the context of progression and evolution. So, Wendy, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's an absolute honor to be on your show. And as always, anything that Cherie Burton's doing, I want to be a part of it. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, awesome. Well, likewise. And Wendy's also involved in a movement called You Got This. Is that?
You Got This Women. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like an interfaith empowerment vehicle for women to connect in the ways that we are similar versus diverse, correct? Like it celebrates the diversity of faith traditions and spirituality. Is that kind of the...
Absolutely. I mean, really what it was all about was breaking down those barriers that separate us as women and understanding that we're all walking a very, very similar path. And if we can unite and link arms and support one another and lift each other up so that we can become the best versions of ourselves, there is power to that. There's power instead of breaking each other down and comparing and wondering, kind of trying to make us feel better by pointing out someone else's flaws. It's like, let's stop doing that and really link arms and say, you know what? Your journey is very similar to mine, even if you don't share the same religion, even if you don't share the same ethnic background. And I can honor and love and respect you. And I hope and pray that you'll love and respect and honor me. And by doing that, we can talk about subjects that really impact all of us. And I can get your perspective, which might completely change my reality, because I might hear it differently from you instead of people that have the similar mindset as I do. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing. We've had a couple of conferences. We're going to have another one in March. It's starting here in Utah, but I truly believe that this will not be just a Utah thing. It will
Oh,
be
no.
a nationwide global movement.
I feel it. I felt it when I came to your event. I was like, this is special.
Yeah.
So, and I know you came to my retreat in October of last year. And so you
Yeah.
kind of know my legalese around feminine empowerment. But let's just kind of dive in
Okay.
because I honestly don't know your health story. Like you don't have to share. I mean, you don't have to like dive like deep down. But do you know what I mean by that? Your health
Oh,
story. Like
absolutely. I am an open book. I have no problem.
because you show up as someone who is so convicted around the empowerment of women and also bringing women together in these communities
Mhm.
and and actually celebrating diversity. And here in Utah, we've had a homogenous culture for so long. I mean, we could talk for a long time about that, but that's what inspired me about you. And so I'm just curious what brought you to this space where you're like, I've got to do this. I've got to bring this out.
Oh, well, it always is the story behind what we do, right? And almost every person that I meet that is very passionate about bringing something about in this world, it's because they've been on the other end of it. They've been on the end of the pain end of the topic, whatever it is, whether it's health or it's relationships or it's self-worth, which is usually at the root of everything, and or it is, whatever it is, it usually is on the other end, and I'm no exception. And I love how Brene Brown always talks about how there is healing in sharing your story, that it takes the power and the shame out of your story when you vocalize it.
Absolutely.
And so I started sharing my story not too long ago, and I couldn't believe the reaction and the healing power that had for me and others. So I absolutely have no problem sharing that. But so my podcast and my book was called Success Through Failing. And a lot of people were triggered by that failure word. And I said, that is exactly why I'm bringing this about, because failing should not have a connotation of negativity. Failing should be celebrated. It should be, you at least gave it a go. You at least tried.
Right,
And
right.
failing is part of our human experience. And it is a beautiful gift wrapped up in a bow, oftentimes disguised with mud all over it, right? So we don't get to see it until we open it and discover the hidden treasures underneath. And that I would say I have many stories just like you, Sheree, and just like all of us. We have lots of times where we've fallen into this pit of darkness that we don't think that we can get out of. And my turning point for my whole life was really about 12 years ago. And I want to set up a little context before I share my story, because sometimes people say, well, Wendy, that's just natural. That's just natural life. Why did you view it that way? So I'm going to go back to a little bit earlier so that people can go, I get why that was such a dark time for her. So I led a fairly idyllic childhood until I was about 15 years old. Great parents, great examples, fantastic support network, was raised with lots of great core values and ethics and moral standards and all of those things. And then at 15, my parents got a divorce, and it was really nasty, really ugly. I was the oldest one at home trying to take care of the family while my mom was really literally crumbling before my eyes. And I didn't have any emotional muscle during that time. There was not really anything for me to lean on because I hadn't had an opportunity to really go through hard stuff. And so rather than go to the going to prayer, turning to scriptures, doing all those things that I was taught, I went against my core values and I started drinking heavily, dabbling in drugs, boys, all the things that would temporarily take away my pain. And really opened my mind up to this negative way of viewing and thinking about myself. When you go against what you believe is true, not only do those voices start, I mean, we're naturally say negative things to ourselves. Even today, I have to kick the negative voices to the curb probably several times a day. But in that space, they were not just talking; they were screaming that I was defective, that I was broken, that I was I couldn't handle life because there was something wrong with me. And at 18, I found out I was pregnant and got married to a man that everybody said I shouldn't get married to. And 30 years later, we're still hanging in there. And so I think I did okay on that one.
You did.
You know, but in that moment, I really felt like I had a skewed version of redeeming myself. That if I was a perfect mom, the perfect wife, all of a sudden I would redeem that path of destruction that I had led. It was a pretty bad situation for 3 years, that I could redeem myself and I would be okay and I would find my worth and I would find my value. And that did okay until about 13 years ago. My barometer was really kind of imploded. And my family was in an absolute crisis. So that barometer and that gauge of, am I doing okay? Because I'd say, hey, are my kids, are my kids doing okay? Are they happy? Okay.
Was that kind of your like how you defined how life actually was through how your kids were
yes.
thinking,
yes.
feeling, behaving? Yeah.
Absolutely. And so how oftentimes do we get caught up in those roles? Like that's what defines us or what we do on a daily basis. Oh, I'm doing okay because look at my to-do list and I checked them all off. Maybe I'm doing okay. And, but I wasn't okay with who I was at that point. And so it took my family literally falling apart in front of my eyes. I had one that was on serious drugs. I mean, heroin, cocaine. He had been, smoking marijuana since he was 14. And the thing that broke this mama's heart the most was when he told me over and over that he hated himself and he loathed himself. And mamas out there probably can understand when you have a child that you see the magnificence inside of them,
right?
And they hate themselves. It just breaks your heart.
I think you internalize their pain as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And you become a savior type, which I don't necessarily think is a horrible thing. But you have so much love and it's so desperately painful to see them struggle that I think it's a natural, almost like a spiritual knee-jerk reaction to internalize your children's pain and to define yourself through how they feel. Like you define your own state of being in terms of how they're feeling.
Absolutely. And that's exactly where I was with that. And kept thinking, what did I do wrong? As a mother, I must be an awful, awful mother. So here I've got this one. Then I've got another child that's just found out she was pregnant with a special needs baby. And doctors were telling her to abort the baby. And I knew from experience that she had signed her childhood over in that decision. And she was going to have to make grown-up decisions. And that this was going to be a pivotal time in her life. I knew how much pain she was going to go through, and it broke my heart. And then I had another child who was so emotionally unregulated, they were going to kick her out of school because she was a school bully. And I look at my 4-year-old who is just, in those tender, beautiful, wonderful, innocent ages. And I look at him and they say, how am I going to mess you up, kiddo? Because I mean, really, that's really where I was emotionally in that moment was there is something so flawed as me as a mother. And the quote that kept coming through my head was, no other success can compensate for failure in the home. And I was a failure. I was an absolute rock bottom mother failure. And in that moment, I made the only good choice that I did during that time, which was get down on my knees and plead to know what I could do to make amends. Because I honestly thought my kids would be better off with a different mom. I
Hmm.
really didn't think that I was cut out for it. And of course, my husband couldn't get off scot-free, so he was taking the blame as well. And our marriage was hanging by a thread. And it was just a really, really dark time in my life. But when I was on my knees is when everything started to turn around, because I I was given the greatest gift in my darkest hour. While I was on my knees, I heard, as I was pleading for forgiveness, um, I heard a word, just one word. And that word was gratitude. And honestly, when I heard that word the first time, I was like, are you kidding me? I just bore my soul to you, telling you everything that is going, that everything's falling apart. And to me, it was like, suck it up, buttercup. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
figure this out. And, but, but I knew I had heard it. I knew I had heard that word, and that maybe it was valuable enough to hear a little bit of inspiration. And so I started to try it out. I would notice the mountains and the beautiful snow capped, peaks, and started to notice the sunrise. All of those beautiful colors that we see, the orange, the yellow, the promise of a new day. And thank you so much for my eyes. Thank you so much for me being able to see this beautiful, magnificent day today, and saw my little boy for the first time smiling at me, and
Hmm.
him saying, "Mommy." He would say this 10 times a day, "Mommy," and he'd sigh, "I love you."
Oh,
It was
I
just
know that. When
sweet.
my little boys did that. Oh, heart
Oh,
melter.
it just, but I saw it new. It was like he'd been doing it, right? It was amazing. It was like I took off a pair of glasses that only saw the gunk and the junk.
I was just going to say that. Like, it's a different lens when you are looking at life through what works versus what isn't.
Yes, yes. And the biggest thing that it led to me understanding was, it was almost like I was tuning into a different frequency, and I could hear inspiration. I could hear a higher, greater energy, that creative force that created you, created me, and has the solutions and the knowledge to all of our problems. And all of a sudden I could ask, and I could receive inspiration and understanding. And when I got to that space, I started to realize my life wasn't just happening to me. My life was happening for me. And I had an opportunity to live it by taking 100% responsibility for it, and creating my own existence. And I started to understand my worth, my value, that I wasn't just a mama.
I love this. So, how did you do that? Like, did you just say, like, you got the word, you got the inspiration, and you had a different outlook? And how did you like do a gratitude journal? Did you do gratitude prayers? Did you do gratitude meditation? Like, or did you just kind of have the mindset with you? Like, what was your sort of method?
That's interesting that you'd say. I think it built upon each other little by little. And that's usually how we learn. It's not all of a sudden overnight we do something different that is completely changed. Remember this, like 13 years ago. And so just a little by little by little. And then I started to, what really works for me, and this is what I do today that makes such a difference, because I am not someone who loves to write in a journal, or at least I didn't. I do now, but I didn't used to love that. But I love music. I love uplifting music. And
Mm.
I'm a visual girl, and I love looking around me and seeing things. And so I would, on a day-to-day basis, I would just notice little things like, oh my gosh, look at that. I am so grateful for that. But where I really feel it the most is in the mornings. I want to start my day off with that alignment. Gratitude truly aligns me into a place where I hear things differently, I see things differently. And so I actually I type really fast, and I have I have my kids call my brain, I have a squirrel brain. Okay. So it's all over the place and very, very easily distracted. So I get on an online journaling program. This is what works for me. And I turn on beautiful, uplifting, amazing music. And I type my gratitude. And it's not just I'm thankful for my family, I'm thankful for my friends, not the 5-year-old version. It's like I am so grateful for the opportunity that I have to start a new day. And I want to make this I want to make a difference for someone. I want to serve someone with my grateful heart. I mean, whatever I'm looking at, thank you so much that I have hands that can type this, that I have hands that can serve another, that can lift another, that can love another. Thank you so much for these hands. And as I get into that space of that deep, deep gratitude, I feel a shift energetically that all of a sudden I know I'm in alignment with my higher power. And in that moment, that's when I will say, hey, what one way can I strengthen my relationship with my child that's struggling right now? How can I communicate in a way that they can hear my love? Or if it's a business situation, how can I increase my business today? Or how can I show up for someone today that might need me? Whatever it is, I get to ask those questions and I generally get the answers fairly quickly at this point. I've practiced enough that I get the answers fairly quickly. It used to take me, sometimes I would notice things throughout the day or through the week, but I understand through that process and through those years, I've gotten to the point where I know I am not just worthy because but I have infinite worth, and my worth isn't based on what I do or or my roles that I keep. My worth is because of who I am, and that is a much different feeling than trying to establish your worth. I call them worth grabs. Where you're like, oh, if I get, if I make this certain dollar amount, then I've made it, right? Or if my kids get in the graduate program at the U of U, I have established myself as a good mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about gratitude, and it really is an energetic tool.
Mm-hmm.
And are you familiar with the work of, I want to say it's Greg Braden, but it might actually be someone else who did the consciousness map. And there's like the different frequencies of different emotional states. Um, what is it? That power versus force?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't know enough about it. So you'll have to share.
So, well, yeah, I want to say his name is Greg Braden, but I might have it wrong, but it's power versus force. Oh no, it's David somebody. Anyway, I'll have to look it up later.
That's okay.
But it's a classic manual for, he's one of the pioneering researchers who has mapped emotional frequency. And the very, very top state that they were able to calibrate or read was gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And you could call it praise. But it was a state of gratitude, and it was akin to bliss, honestly, where it was higher than love, even in terms of, because it's love flows through us naturally, but gratitude is something we have to focus on. But the idea is that gratitude is an outflow of these higher emotional states like love. And it's a presencing state. It's a state of noticing and a magnifier of all the others. But you have to, it's proactive. It's something that you have to really be focused on to create it. But our cells are like programmed to praise. As soon as we receive something, the body wants to literally lift up and go, oh, thank you. Like raising hands, I look at cell receptor sites as like arms outstretched, like, thank you. But we tend, when we receive something, we tend to, I mean, this is like more of a natural man state. We tend to either downplay it, say we don't deserve it, or where's the next attack going to come energetically before I can really relish what just happened, you know?
Yes.
But I think, and as I'm listening to you, it's beautiful that you just got that one word, because according to this map of consciousness, that is the highest state, but it requires, I think that God has to tell us what to, that, like, it's all over as a pattern in scripture to praise.
Yes.
It's not that God has this huge ego that he needs us to just keep praising him over every little thing. He doesn't need the praise, but we need it in our being. We need to do it so that we can raise our vibration.
Right. And you know what, Cherie? I honestly believe that practicing this in the last decade is what has changed everything, including my own personal energy and frequency and it's attracting so much abundance because it literally changed who I was. It changed my neural pathways. My habit was not one of always thinking about what was going wrong and the negative things in my life, but it was reprogramming it to see the good and think positive and expect positive. And you know that Emoto water crystal,
water, yeah, the Japanese,
yeah, we're
Dr.
almost all
Emoto.
water. So I was literally cellularly changing who I was. And as a result, success now comes way more naturally. I don't have to fight it. I don't have to struggle in it. People show up in my life that are beautiful and positive, and it wasn't because I was doing things differently on my to-do list. It was because it was becoming a different person on the core level, and just makes life so much easier and so much greater. And do I still have failures? Every day I do, but there are some of the greatest blessings in my life. And even some of the things that are painful and challenging and so hard, I have learned to literally, like you said, put your hands out and like you're surrendering and saying, I am so grateful. Like right now, I'm learning to deal on a different level with my anxiety. And I have been known to say many times during the day, I am so grateful for my anxiety. I trust that this is the perfect path for me. And I am ready to receive miracles and blessings to help alleviate the symptoms of anxiety. And so even in that realm, I'm shifting in a different place of even accepting those things that are really not things that I would sign up for, but they are.
Well, yeah, I think we get a perfectly crafted set of divine tutorials through circumstance and experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually, it's, I don't know, I just keep going back to some of the prophets and figures in scripture who are literally giving like these huge trials. And when they go to pray, I'm just thinking about Job in particular, like when they go to praise or gratitude, it's not that the experience goes, it's not that the circumstances necessarily change. It's that they have whether in that valley experience or in that depth experience, they are able to have a different take on suffering and perspective so that they're able to endure whatever's being hurled towards them. And and honestly, I and this is what I'm just hearing from you, and I'm relating to everything you're saying, that I think it's for mothers, it's a different kind of hell when, I mean, it's one thing to go through your own stuff, but when you're going through changes in life hormonally, or you're having your own crises and understandings, and you're staying up late for your teenagers, and you're also parenting younger kids, like, it's a different kind of hell when you see your kids like, it's a different kind of fear around life. the functioning of your home life is a whole other animal than just what you're experiencing within your being. And you'd almost rather put yourself on hold
Oh, yeah.
and not process your own stuff in favor of, let me kind of like try to save or fix whatever's happening with these beings in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it ends when they leave the home. Would you agree with that?
I honestly feel like when they leave the home, there's even a different energy that takes on, because now you're not dictating and having, home rules and boundaries. Now it's left up to 100% their free agency, which it was anyways before. I mean,
Mhm.
honestly, what I learned in my discovery and this journey is with mothers is that my job is to love them unconditionally, be their greatest cheerleader, be their greatest advocate, and allow them to fall as many times as they need to, and love them along the way. And in that space, love myself just as much. And
Mhm.
with that being said, it's really interesting how my kids, once mama was not having so many expectations, and that's a really heavy thing to have
Mm.
when you feel like your mom's happiness is dependent on whether or not you do okay.
Right.
That's a
Yeah.
really heavy expectation, and as I've lifted that and said, you know what, I absolutely trust that you are going to have the perfect journey for yourself, and you are very smart and capable and competent. And guess what? You probably will fall down many, many, many times, but I'm going to help you come. I'm going to lift you back up, and I'm going to love you, and I'm going to hug you and say, keep going,
Mm.
and so when I shifted into that space, that is when my relationships deepened with my children. My kids, my oldest does not have an issue with the hard drugs. He lives in Colorado for a reason. uh, and it works for him. He has bipolar, and it's he calls it his medicine, and I absolutely support him 100%.
Mm.
And my daughter placed her baby for adoption with a family that couldn't have kids. And they're some of my best friends. The adoptive parents, Olivia is someone I get to see her all the time. And my daughter grew like she would have never grown had she not
Mm.
gone through that experience. And she is a woman of depth and character and courage and strength. And I am so, so grateful for that experience that we all got to share.
That's so beautiful. I When you said the word depth just now, I just had a flash of, this beautiful young girl. I mean, I placed a baby for adoption as well. Just the circumstances in my life when I was in college and getting pregnant. And I think you and I even talked about that story on
Yeah.
your podcast. But
Yeah.
just the depth that and it really is true. Like the further you fall, the higher you rise.
Hmm.
Because I mean, and even my sister, you interviewed my sister Tanya on your show, and she's been
Yeah.
through 5 divorces and struggled with bipolar, and she's such a survivor. But I look at her and women like her that have, you could look at their bio. We all have a good bio and we all have a crappy bio. Like nobody shares the bio of all of the mistakes you've made, and you could set yourself up for prejudice so quickly. So most people say, "Oh my gosh, she was married 5 times," or me, "Oh my gosh, why would she place her baby for adoption? She was 25 years old, like she could have done it." And I think that one of the greatest lessons we can learn in life is to have a tarnished reputation to a degree.
Hmm.
Um, Even though my reputation definitely was at stake at that time in my life and still is, to bring it up, it's very vulnerable. Um, I know how God feels about it. And if he and I are the only two who get it, and my task in life is to drown out the voice of others and hearken to the voice of my creator and use it as a vehicle for empowerment and honing the depth around that loss and that reputation violation. That's okay. That's got to be okay. And even as, even as a baby 50-year-old that I am now, I still find myself, wondering, what are people going to think? They really knew. But in my soul, it's like, oh, but what if you did not have that experience? What if that never happened to you?
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't trade it. So when you're talking about your kids and sort of instilling this confidence in them, like, I trust you, you're capable, you're going to fall, you're probably going to fall really hard, people are going to turn against you, like all of the rhetoric around like what to expect as you navigate through life. Do you feel like, do you feel the truth of it? Or do you still find yourself in a place of, oh my gosh, do they have what it takes? Do you know what I mean? Like there's that line between, oh, they have no idea what they're doing. They're so young, but yet I trust them and I want them to know that I trust them. I guess that's the task for me, is just with my older kids is instilling the confidence, but still guarded, cautionary, like, hey, I'd rather you avoid this particular thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think as mothers, we're just going to naturally give unsolicited advice from time to time. but, but at the same time, almost all my kids are grown now. I only have one left at home who's going to be 15 in a month. And it just kills me when I think about that.
Mm.
But with that being said, I really do find myself, I still worry. And that is one thing that I am working on, because I don't necessarily think that worry is something that is helping my children. I think that it is, especially with my oldest son, the one that was on drugs, the more I thought about the possibilities and the things that I knew his strengths and focused on his strengths just in my own thinking on a day-to-day basis, I really almost think energetically that sent to him, like, that, I feel like that impacts him way more positively than me worrying about what's might go wrong. And also understanding that it, even with self-esteem, it took this mama, 40 years to kind of finally figure out that she liked herself. So it may take one of my kids 40 years to finally like themselves and to have enough confidence to step into a place where they're willing to share their gifts with others and with the world. And that's okay, because that will be their perfect journey. But the way I can support them more than anything is thinking positively and cheering them on the sidelines, saying, you got this. You got this. I know you do. I love you. You have everything you need to be successful. And when I'm in that space, and I'm not going to tell you I'm in that space every moment of the day, because we're human and humans fail all the time.
Right.
And humans fall prey to fear. And I love the quote. This is my favorite quote, and I say it many, many times a day. We're on a journey of unlearning fear and remembering love. And so that is kind of my mantra: is, oh, I'm in fear. Let's connect back to love.
I love it. And really that is it. That is the deal. If
Mm-hmm.
if we feel love and our children feel love,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that is the great aligner. I mean, everything but gets thrown into perspective around it's not just a feeling, it's a power, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite quotes that I've had to really, really, like, I get it logically, but I don't know that it's come down into my heart and soul yet. But if you learned, it wasn't a failure. If you learned something, it wasn't a mistake.
Yes.
Um, we came down to earth to fail. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
think about it. It is a grand setup for failure. There's absolutely no way. And I think this is why people go, atheists or really struggle spiritually, because it's like, why would we be all put on this planet with all this distortion and all of these seemingly insurmountable odds, and are expected to come out squeaky pure and clean? Like, it's it creates some anger, I think, and resentment for a lot. I think we've all gone through it, no matter how spiritual,
Mm.
religious, or whatever you are. Um, like I look at my adoption experience, and it literally was a universal setup. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy that I met, like our chemistry, like what we triggered in each other, and the power struggles, and the my daddy stuff, his mommy stuff, like, and then we have this child who, like, she's supposed to be here. She's not a mistake.
Yeah.
Um, so I think one of the great misunderstandings here on earth is that there is a expectation to toe a certain line, and there's one way, one path, one. There are many ways and many paths, and it's through our seeming failure that we learn. We could
Hmm.
not have learned without a body. We could have not learned what darkness is without experiencing it. It was only this ethereal, sort of like intangible concept as a spirit being. But if you descend into a body, it then becomes experience and necessary to feel. I look at people who struggle with addiction, and I'm like, dang, that is such a powerful lesson for your
Hmm.
spirit to go through that. I have a brother right now who has been sober for, I think, just barely a year. And he is in his 40s. He could have lost his life, he could have lost everything, his family, everything. And he is one of the most spiritual beings I know. He
Mm.
is incredible. And I think he's now realizing that there's a great power in dissent and being in the literal gutter, and what the lessons are as you rise. And he wouldn't say he's conquered anything yet, but just that space and perspective around, wow, what did I just learn? And what am I learning right now? And that is not failure.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, what a champion. What an incredible champion to rise above addiction for 12 months.
Mm,
He's a spiritual giant and definitely should be applauded.
mm,
So that's
yeah.
fantastic news.
Yeah. Love him. Love my brother Bryce. So, Wendy, I don't know if we hit everything that you're about, and like you're a deep person, and I love you, and I love everything you're saying. If you could, I mean, I actually had written down, like, you gave me a huge aha while we were talking, and I love your idea of kind of that free flow of gratitude with music, and
Mm.
sort of the language of the soul is music, right? It's the universal uplifter and frequency changer, but
Hmm.
just pairing that with gratitude and writing it down, I think that is extremely powerful tool that a lot of listeners, including myself, um, can maybe start to implement. Is there anything else that, like, I know you talk to a lot of women. I know that because your podcast is focused around success through failure, is there anything that you've noticed as you've done, probably talked to, I don't know how many you've talked to, dozens, hundreds, whatever, but is there something that you're seeing as like a universal underpinning or a commonality that perhaps you've learned that you didn't know before, or has maybe validated something for you, or something that we could benefit from all of the interviews that you've done with women who've gone through really, really difficult things?
Yeah, I would say that there's two major things that I see with successful women and all the women that I've been able to interview over the course of the last few years. The first one is that very failure got them to the place where they were so low that they had no other choice but to look up. And in that process, they learned to connect with a higher source of power and good, and that was their catalyst to greatness. So every single one, they might call it different. They might call it Heavenly Father, their Savior Jesus Christ. They might call it the divine power, their Creator, their beloved. It doesn't really matter what the language is. It all revolves around the fact that they finally found a personal relationship and alignment with that greater source of power. That would be the number one thing I see with every single woman, which also led to them understanding their value and their worth internally as a daughter of God, or just a divinely created individual. So that would be the number one. And then the second one is that they have a different perspective. They don't look at life happening to them and that everything is just left up to fate. They understand that they were 100% responsible for it and that life happens for them. And it's a much different attitude and perspective, so that when things are thrown at them, they almost naturally look at it with curiosity and go, well, what does this mean? What is this for? Like, what lesson am I supposed to learn from this? Instead of going, it always happens to me. If anything bad's going to happen, it's going to happen to this girl, Yeah. It's a different way of viewing things. And those are the two major things that are very consistent with every single successful woman. And when I talk about success, I'm not talking financial abundance and all the worldly goods that they could have. I'm talking about someone who's so secure and confident within herself that she radiates this glow of well-being. And that to me is success.
I love it. I love it. And I think success is very subjective to each individual. I'm actually redefining what success means to me as I start to age, because I've been through building business and that kind of success, and I've been through like the rise and fall in some relationships, and I'm recognizing that I'm the common denominator. And I think that you've inspired me to show more gratitude to my God and for my own self as a divine being. Because you know what? I've survived 50 years on this freaking planet.
Yes, you did. Yes, you have.
She's still going. And it's women like you that really do validate it for me too, because I love, and thank you for what you shared about your children, because I know I think as mothers, again, we're trying to deprogram this whole mystique around internalizing the outcome of our children, and their achievements tied into our own sense of self and well-being as mothers. It's a very natural thing to do. They're bone of our bone, flesh of our flesh. Whether they're adopted or biological, it doesn't matter. Like we do internalize their outcomes. But you have such a healthy perspective on that now, and I am grateful for what you've shared today. I have gratitude for you. Yay. We just raised that. But any other parting thoughts as we sort of round this out? Any other offerings in perspective for some of our listeners maybe who are in that valley?
Of course, practicing gratitude in whatever form you will allow to come into your life is going to be so crucial. It will change your life. If your listeners even try it for, 7 days consecutively, just doing something, maybe when they first wake up, even just starting their day off with thoughts of gratitude. And then I would say the second part would be do some sort of self-care for yourself, because you cannot pour from an empty vessel. And as women, especially, we're constantly in a place, we find joy and satisfaction in serving others. And that's a beautiful thing. But we also need to serve and take care of ourselves. And we need to be the greatest example for our kiddos of how you take care of something you love. And how do we teach our kids how to love themselves and have a good sense of self-worth if mama doesn't have it? So starting with self-care and learning self-worth, if you will practice gratitude and you will do some sort of self-care, anything that lights up your world. For me, I love yoga. I love meditation. I didn't used to, but now I've learned to quiet my mind, and I love that space. Maybe it doesn't have to be like going to get a pedicure or anything. Maybe it's taking a bubble bath. Maybe it is reading for a little bit because you never take the time to read and you love to read. But doing some sort of self-care to show yourself that you are valuable and you are worthwhile. And when you get to a place where you absolutely fall head over heels in love with yourself, everything changes.
I love it. You've reminded me of my friend Vanessa in Australia. She pairs gratitude with self care through a goddess ritual of anointing with oil. And so
Mm,
she thanks each body part as maybe I'll have her as a guest on the show, but you made me think about that because your top tips were gratitude and self care. And I think if you combine them, that could be super powerful. Um, that's the last thing we want to do is thank our bodies sometimes, but just noticing, don't you think, like being present and just noticing?
yes.
And that to me, that is a super high vibe form of self care because you're gathering the breadcrumbs for why your life is beautiful and that you're worth it. Oh my gosh, Wendy, well, I could just talk to you forever, and we're going to talk some more as soon as I stop this recording. But thank you for your time and for your wisdom. I know that you'll have helped many women today through this.
No,
sharing.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thank you again, Wendy, for reminding us that it is truly not so much a stumbling block as we think it is to have a past or to have messiness or dysfunction, because actually those can be great stepping stools to being a force for good on this planet. Keep checking my website. I've got a couple of programs coming up. I'm super excited about an emotional wholeness masterclass, which is an online course, as well as a 22-day depression cleanse. So check those out on my website, CherieBurton.com, and you'll hear from me again, episode 11.